This meeting is being recorded.
We're ready. I think I'm ready.
All right. Do we have anybody else on Zoom? I see planning, but I don't see a person.
I was supposed to put Tracy's.
Okay.
Is she on there?
Okay. So I'm gonna call the meeting to order because all of you who came should be respected for being on time. And which is Crusty's. Thank you very much. First order of business, call to order, and introductions. I will start off and we'll go around the table and then we'll join Jenny on the screen. My name is Bob Camber. I am the chairperson for the Traffic Safety Commission.
I'm Jackie Jones, I'm the Review New Secretary. Hey, we all pick up this.
I'm Deanna Balcar and I'm Vice Chair.
Spencer Pollock with Canby Public Works.
Jerry Nelzine, Canby Public Works.
Jenny.
Jenny Driscoll, member of the committee.
Alrighty. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes for our May 11th meeting? And if so, is there a motion to accept?
I motion to accept the minutes.
Is there a second?
I can second.
Okay. All in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Approved. Thank you very much. First order of business is to discuss the concerns from our citizen from last month. I was thinking she said that she was going to try to be here for the meeting. So I'm going to jump over that and come back to it, okay? If everybody agrees, to give her a little bit more time if she shows up, okay?
That makes sense.
So next thing we'd like to talk about is just a logistics issue. We've had a request from Public Works that I agree about moving the site of our meetings, okay, down to Public Works on a monthly basis. One, there is a logistics issue, always trying to rearrange the room and everything. And Public Works, I know from being at a meeting yesterday, has really changed their conference room to be a real high-tech meeting room with 3 different screens and good logistics and good Zoom capabilities. I also found that they can bring up Google Earth real quick for us to be able to see what we're talking about. So, I mean, there's some logistics issues that would be well satisfied if we go there. It's not as centrally located as the City Hall, but it wouldn't hurt everybody to visit our Public Works building too, to know where we're one of our main people in this.
Is it in the same place?
Where we used to do it.
Okay. I just over by,
Off territorial down closer for Clint.
So let me throw that out as for a discussion point. Anybody have any thoughts about that?
Hey, if it's a better location, I'm all for it. I don't see any reason why we would need to be in the location you're currently in, but I don't know the history behind that.
Yeah.
It's in our charter that we have it at City Hall unless authorized, requested at City Council, they can authorize it to do it in another place. And I just would like, they're gonna redo this whole council chambers for this, so it's gonna be some construction and stuff, so while that goes on, I'd like us to have a smooth transition, be able to be down there, and then when they're done, we move back here.
That makes sense.
Make it easier on all
Yep.
of us. We got plenty of parking and coffee and all good
as long as
stuff.
you got
We got coffee, yeah.
in the donuts.
Is there,
Get donuts even.
is there any other points of discussion?
I think that's fine.
Is there a motion to recommend, we would be recommending to the city that we move our meetings, monthly meetings to public, recommend to them that we move our monthly meeting to Public Works, starting in, July. And we'll see what if they would agree or not. Is there a motion to that effect?
I'll make a motion, I make a motion that we put a request to, city council to let us meet at Public Works starting in July.
Is there a second?
I second it.
All those in favor, say aye.
I,
Aye.
Any
Okay,
opposed? Okay, the motion is approved. And I will transmit that to, Maya, our representative.
you guys, I got, Don Hardy. He can't connect to the Zoom for some reason, but I have him on speakerphone
Okay.
here, so.
Don, thank you for joining us.
You're welcome, Bob. Sorry, I apologize. I don't know, I'm just having some technical difficulties. I actually could hear you guys, and I was a picture of my desk, but I'm actually at home, so I would be happy to start out and give you guys a report.
Okay,
As needed, I apologize for being late.
thank you very much. Much appreciate you joining us. Okay, let's see. We got that thing, move meeting. Okay. Well, Don, you're very appropriate that you come in. Somebody up there, some guardian angel just knew you were needed. We're starting our old business agenda, and the first thing was enterprise rent-a-car update. Last time we talked, they were trying to negotiate some agreements with the local businesses to get extra space. Have they been in contact with you since then?
Bob, yeah, I have a report. I talked to Chris Seibert from Enterprise yesterday. He's been trying to work out the issues. He does have an agreement, he said, with the funeral home. He has been working with the director of the funeral home for 10 parking spaces. He also has one additional space for McCacken. I asked him to provide the documentation to me so that I can have that and close out the piece. He said that the 10 spaces would be their normal typical fleet size, and so that's essentially where that ended up. Is yesterday I was trying to get a hold of him for the last week. He got a hold of me yesterday, and so I'm just looking for the actual documentation. I want him to send an email. Happy to forward that on to the committee here. But essentially, I think that hopefully should resolve the situation where he has the parking off-site parking on the street. And so that I'm just waiting for him to get back to me, hoping that we have that buttoned up in the next 2 weeks, week or two. I will continue to follow up with him on that. So I just basically said, give me the documentation that you've got. I don't need the details of what your arrangement is financially with the funeral home, but we would like to have that information. So hopefully that gives a positive report out for you guys.
Thank you. I really appreciate your continued effort to kind of move this forward. And that's a real positive for the neighborhood. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yeah.
Okay. The second item on the old business is our subcommittee on 2nd and 3rd Street.
Hey, can I interject real quick? I'm sorry, being on the phone and with a small child who's decided now is the time to have a freak out. So there's going to be 10 off-site parking spaces leased through the nearby funeral home that's going to keep all of the enterprise all the enterprise vehicles off of the street parking.
You got to hit the numbers, not letters.
So
You got to press the.
Jenny, to clarify your question, you're asking if the 10 spaces will meet Enterprise's needs? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, are they saying that their entire fleet is going to be off of the street at that point?
One space based on the square footage of their office space. Currently, they have 125 square feet. we have a standard of 1 space for every 550 square feet. That's the current code. So they're actually exceeding that by providing that. And I mean, what Chris said was he's providing for his fleet. So that's, I think it's a win-win on our end. We can't require him to do more than the code requires.
Okay.
But for the allowance that comes with their the size of their building, is that for 24 hours a day?
I don't know what their arrangement is. I'm waiting to hear back from the funeral home on what his arrangement with the funeral home. I would assume that he's got that arranged.
In addition, Jen, Don and I have talked about the fact that, you know, when we look at the code, and we're hoping to, in the future, have a little bit more discussion on codes, is to see whether there needs to be some exceptions to codes where companies such as this rent-a-car business to be locked into a square footage to decide that their parking needs. The code probably needs more flexibility so that there can be exceptions, especially for a car rental company that rents just a small office. But that's something that is a long-term project that has to, because the code revisions would have to come after study. But Don and I have talked about that. Is that correct, Don?
You're right, Bob. I would agree there's a deficiency in our current code. I mean, I think we need to clearly update our code and make that provision. I'm not dismissing the situation at all, but I think we clearly need to have a provision in there to address things like car rental, which our current code simply does not address. So it is deficient. We will be updating the code. We will be doing the transportation system plan update, provided we get approval from council to do the comprehensive plan and transportation system plan updates. As part of the transportation system plan update, I want the consultant to look at parking adequacy in terms of the number of spaces for development. In commercial, I think there's some lacking in, this is one situation where there's some lacking. But like on the other spectrum, on employment, some of the industrial parking standards are huge. So I think there's some adjustments across the board that needs to take place. So as part of the transportation system plan, there'll be an evaluation of that holistically. We'll follow that up with code provisions to update the parking standards in the code. It's a holistic review that needs to occur.
I clarify one thing. But you're saying like the code, like, so we're saying that enterprise actually is allowed a certain amount of parking for the code. Just want to make sure you're fine.
Did you hear that, Don?
And look at Jerry, what was, can you translate?
I'm gonna take one over, sir. Jack, you can ask that question again.
Oh, I just wanted to clarify, you were saying that enterprise, like businesses were allowed a certain amount of parking per business?
Well, essentially what the code is they have to have a certain number of off-site spaces, and that's the current standard.
So what
And
is that?
each category, there's not really a category.
They get wrong.
There's not really a category for rental car.
So-
the rental car projects.
So Dawn, Jackie's just trying to clarify in her notes. So they get one off-site parking spot.
That's current code is, one is required, yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's the maximum we can ask for that application on the city parking code.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that, Dawn.
So it's right now, I'm just trying to like address this and work with enterprise to get the most we can, given the fact that we're kind of a little bit in a pinch on the fact that we really, can't require them to go beyond the code, but they're volunteering to, they understand there's an issue, they know that the neighborhood's upset, and, we understand that, and I think part of that is just trying to get to somewhat of a compromise in terms of like addressing that. Meanwhile, we need to update the code.
Does that answer your question, Jenny?
As much of it as I heard, I think so. Sorry, I had a little person
No problem.
issue on my end. It sounds like they, to reiterate, they get one official space that is theirs to use 24/7. And yeah, I mean, obviously staff needs to park somewhere too. But it is what it is, I guess, if they get one spot that, yep. That doesn't seem terribly unreasonable. And
Well,
so I'm glad that they're finding some solutions for the rest of it. Because yeah, it's not so much that the neighborhood cares in and of itself, but we've got a significant crunch when assessing other issues with parking availability in the neighborhood. And that's really what made it so important to resolve. So thank you all for your time.
All right. Moving on to the second issue on whole business, the Second Street and Third Street Subcommittee. We had a slide presentation and a discussion. I'm trying to move to see what we want to concretely do about this. My thing is, and you can disagree, is that we made some recommendations in the slide presentation. And I think we need to endorse those recommendations and either then proceed to a public discussion, have a chance to discuss them, or we send them to the city, or we choose not to endorse the recommendations. So how would the committee like to proceed? And that includes members can jump in and talk too.
Do we need to wait until your group's here, Bob, or? I mean, aren't we missing a lot of key people on this, or?
No, I mean, I think I'm the only one that's here on our ones.
Well, you know, I mean, I agree it would be nice to have a bigger forum, but at the same time, this thing.
We need to move forward.
At some point, I don't mind if the committee feels that we should wait the next month.
Well, do we have to have a quorum to go forward?
Well, we have a forum.
Okay.
We have
Oh, we
four.
do?
No,
We have four.
Oh,
Out
okay,
of
never
7.
mind. Sorry,
So we
Bob.
have a forum.
Okay.
I didn't think we did, sorry.
Yeah. At least I think, right? We have 7 members, 4 are present. That's a forum.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I think.
So I was,
By sending out the agenda earlier too.
So
there's the traffic study that for me is kind of a little bit of a linchpin on what's the best path forward with the recommendations that we make to the community and see what the feedback is. I dug up the 2 DKS traffic studies for Jerry late last week. The first one was done before the project was voted on by the Planning Commission. And so he said with it being done before that, he would have the authority to actually enforce the recommendations. And then the second one was released right before the appeal hearing. So those have information in them that says that we need 280 feet of sight distance in either direction. And if that is something that we were going to enforce, then that pretty much wipes out 60% of the street, if I'm interpreting it correctly. And then that also, then plays into what do you do when 60% of 3rd Street can't be parked on? And then you get to pick which side of the street to park on for that little 20% on either end that, is close to fairly busy streets of Ivy and Elm. So I would love to have a little bit more clarity about what that might look like before we took it to the neighborhood. And maybe potentially they're going to have that built in the next 2 months, I would assume. And we'll start to see all the extra cars streaming in. So the demand from that would probably play into what people might want to do longer term. Because at this point, my concern is that if we make a decision over the summer in the short term, that means that we might be trying to make a decision based on current conditions when they're going to be changing quite significantly if we, again, implement the traffic studies recommendations. And then once we get all the extra cars from these new apartments, because there's going to be for the cost that they rent out at.
let me clarify something. You brought that up, and Jerry's here and he can verify it. You brought that concern up last month about the traffic study wanting to restrict parking over a large area of things. I actually saw down at Public Works, the signed agreement,
Construction plans.
construction plans, and that were approved through Planning Commission. They reference nothing about the traffic study. And so,
Sure.
in effect, that traffic study was obviously considered by the Planning Commission. My interpretation, they considered it, but they chose not to follow those recommendations. So, in
What would
effect,
make you think that they chose not to follow the recommendations?
because the construction plan is the signed document, and it spells out exactly what the contractor is going to do. And it
So the
was,
traffic,
and it has been approved by the Planning Commission and the Planning Department and all of the agencies in town. Now, I can't speak to why, because I don't know why the Planning Commission or the Planning Department didn't choose to do the traffic, to take the recommendations of the traffic. All I do know is this is the plan that the contractor is going to do. Am I right?
Yeah, and I wanted to follow up on that because,
Okay.
I had a talk with my city administrator about this, Jenny, because I've read what you sent, and I guess, can you hear me all right?
yes, I can, thank you.
I read what you sent, I read the traffic study, and, what I was talking to Scott about is, I felt like maybe Public Works is missing a process, because like Bob says, once we all sign the construction plans, that's what's built. And so what Scott was, our city administrator was saying is that maybe we need to sit down, him, myself, and Don Hardy, to go over who reviews what, who does what, see what it is. I think it's a planning thing, but I think planning might need a Public Works support on this. But yeah, I've never reviewed really any of that. Like I was telling you earlier, and I'm looking at what
Yeah.
I'm reading, and I see your concern on this now. And so for any work on your project, I'm not gonna say we can't go and do anything or any type of stuff on that. It would just be up to Public Works to do it now. We can't make the contractor do it because we missed it during that planning stage and all that.
Well,
So
I don't think we need the contractor to, I mean, it says it's a certified public something, or like, I don't know what the criteria was, but an Oregon State certified so-and-so needs to evaluate the site distance before they allow occupancy. Like that seems to me, if there was a traffic study done, it was commissioned and paid for, and it was a condition of approving the project is, oh, this traffic study is done, and it says if we do these things, then it's safe. Therefore, we're going to move forward this project that had an incredible amount of exceptions being made to it for the location, that really should mean something. It was paid for, it was laid out by professionals about what's supposed to be safe, and we're talking about a safe route to school. It's not just about the parking. From a parking perspective for the neighborhood, it's terrible. I don't like it at all, but I also don't want to watch any kids get run over because we've got these two street, basically a new intersection and an existing adjacent intersection that don't have any visibility.
Well, I understand.
Can Don comment on this?
Don?
Maybe
Jerry,
he's
can
got-
you, I'm sorry about the technical difficulties. I'm glad I'm finally on. I'm sitting in my office and I'm actually at home to both. So you guys can hear me?
Yes, we can
Okay.
hear you right now, Don.
You need an
Jerry,
update.
give me the thumbnail. Which, is this Redwood? Which project are we talking about?
Yeah, Spade Street Homes off Third Avenue. It's kind
Okay.
of where the rental car place problem is. And it's
Okay.
where-
CR 2401.
And Dawn, do I need to let you know exactly what the concern is, or did you hear all that?
I think I heard the site distance verification by an engineer. Is that what the issue is?
It's more than that. What it is how are we getting to construction phase and occupancy? And are we following the traffic studies? Who's enforcing that? Is Planning Commission reading that? Is Public Works supposed to be reading that, or planning? And if not, is there something missing or broken? Do we need to fix it? That's kind of the gist. I've never really reviewed them, Don. We've always kind of relied on the engineers to look at it.
Yeah.
Our engineer to look at it and comment. But is that you guys too, or me?
I would say during the construction plan review process is the first part of that, Jerry, and then obviously occupancy is another part of that, which is where the building permit process of the county goes through. Those would be the two parts. But I think more importantly, probably the front end of this is that we coordinate between planning and public works during if there are questions about compliance with the planning commission's conditions, that those be kind of initially looked at during the construction plan review.
So in an instance where one of these is done, we should probably not be having the meetings the same day or the next day as when they're released to us. Because that was an issue with these. So they're rolling out right before the meeting, so nobody's looking at them.
Don, one more fundamental question is, does the planning department and the city have to follow everything in a traffic study?
That's a real good question, Bob. I think maybe dialing that down as to the answer is yes, in terms of like, if there's conditions that permeate through our conditions of approval, that's clearly going to be something that's required. I mean, I guess, is there, what specifically are you asking, Bob? I mean, like, because I would say that for the most part, traffic studies are in fact being reflected in conditions of approval. If there's something specific like road improvements and frontage, those kinds of things are addressed pretty typically up front. I mean, because we're working with Public Works, and there's kind of a collaborative between the consulting firm we're using, DKS, and Public Works on road projects in particular. And it's kind of a collaborative review of that. So did you have something specific, Bob?
In this particular one, the biggest question is the setback, the driveway setback, where it requires, we've been pushing 20 feet on both sides to allow the fire department to make a sweeping entrance. But my understanding, this particular traffic study has recommended that there be something like a
280-foot site distance with parking and vegetation cleared.
So it's an unusually long clearance, and it doesn't seem to be reflected anywhere in the planning department or the planning commission's recommendation, and it's certainly not in the construction plan. So, we're not sure whether it was considered or whether it was an oversight or it was considered and decided not to follow through. It's kind of just standing out there. It's kind of peculiar.
The original planning commission meeting was delayed for a month so that this could be done, and then it was added to the package shortly before the planning commission meeting. So the planning commission did not hear this project because they were waiting for the traffic study. So the impression was that traffic study was going to be taken into consideration or matter in some way, shape, or form, or else what's the point?
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe to the point on the site distance piece, I think that is something that we clearly, I would say that is an important element. I'm not disagreeing with that. I think as to what that exactly means, really, I don't think that necessarily means there's no parking within 280 feet on a street, because you can have a car. This is more something that's, I think site distance is something more related to obstruction, like vegetation. That would be more of an issue than, I think part of this is it does need to get addressed. And I would say those are important elements that we probably need to be working more closely with Public Works on.
So Don, are we too late to address this? Because I always go with my construction plans, once we sign it, we're kind of done on our end. I just, for occupancy, is there time to fix this?
Well, there might be, Jerry, and I'm happy that part of this gets a little bit, I believe it's going to be treated like commercial because it's multifamily. I need to check on that. I mean, I know commercial and industrial, we clearly are doing the temp and final reviews for occupancy. Residential, I'm not sure if that's in the same review process at the county, but I can check on that. So in both internal and just to see where that's at. I mean, I'm not sure where they're at in terms of their occupancy and what the construction status is for that.
Okay. Well, Dawn, if you check on that, so in the future, do I need to look at these and put it in my notes before planning commission on future any type of development? Is that what needs to happen? Is this kind of a public thing?
I think that yes, Jerry, I think we need to talk through those items. I think we need to collaborate a little more closely on, because there is this marriage between like the DKS piece and public works. And sometimes those conditions are really coming from DKS because they're reviewing this from traffic. And so it's a little bit out. I wouldn't say it's outside of our code, but they're adding things to what would normally, I mean, we have site distance in our code, but they're being a lot more specific about it. And so that,
I think it would make my life easier too, and Spencer's life easier if we were involved, if we started doing that review with us, make our engineer look at it, because Jenny was nice enough to put together this quick little, just what's going on here, 2 paragraphs. And it's just saying that basically the way I read this is it needs to be looked at and it needs to be verified, documented, and stamped by a professional civil or traffic engineer. So we could put that back on, them. We need to put that back on them and then have them comment on the traffic study to make sure the plans reflect that, I would think.
yeah, and I would agree, Jerry. So this is the apartment project on State Street, right? That's okay.
Yeah.
Okay, yep, I got it. No, I think let me
Grant running into it, and it's just kind of a weird intersection and everything else. And with fire and everything else, it was one of them infill ones that just been really difficult. We need to just look at them closer, I guess.
No, and I let me do this. I'll check. When I get into the office today, I'll check on the kind of where that's at in the process. And I don't have a problem calling the county up, Shirley, and connecting with them or having somebody connect with them or Matt Roselle on that. Cause I would even be okay with contacting the applicants on this and saying, we really need this to be looked at. This is something that is, part of the process.
The other thing that Jenny had a concern about was the trees. They've been there forever. They're nice, everything else. That's, I think, we don't want to pick and choose, but I think if there was a site obstruction from a tree, we wanted to keep it, that would be something that we would talk to an engineer and say, can we leave that? So, or does it have to go?
Yeah. Yeah, we lost all the pretty trees. They took those all out with what's already been cleared out. But there are the neighbor next door doesn't have many trees left. So there's kind of a not so fabulous bushy tree thing in front of a more established tree that could probably be cleared out. But it would be nice not to take both away from them because they really got the short end of the stick on this.
Ideally, Jenny, if we could, again, this is back to the engineering side. Typically, if you can limb, again, I'm not stating this as factual, but
sure.
Hopefully you can actually leave the tree trunk and limb so you're above 8 feet. I think that's the standard. So you can actually see, that's typical in most cities. So the tree, and again, that's kind of up to the engineering review, but that would be, I think that'd be great if they could leave a tree and just limit up. But again, that's kind of out of my technical expertise here.
Yeah. And Don, I'd like to ask you that just for changing the planning department process on things, that if we know that a traffic study is coming, as in what's the situation with this project, if it's coming in 24, 48 hours before the planning commission meeting, maybe we don't hear that particular project that particular week. It just seems like it needs to go through these additional processes, and more departments need to review and weigh in, fire, public works, everybody before it gets taken to the commission. Because this one really got rammed through, and it really is unfortunate because it had a lot of shortcomings that if people, the pertinent departments had been given full opportunity to do their analysis and review, I don't think it would have turned out the way that it did.
You know, and I hear you. I mean, I think obviously we want to be going in a situation where things are understood and ironed out, to the, you know, and that we strive for that to be. I mean, part of this, it doesn't help anybody to ram something through where there may be unresolved issues. I'm pretty much a big advocate of that. And behind the scenes, what you guys probably don't see as much is applications just to get to hearing. I mean, we're oftentimes going back and forth with the applicant on this stuff really needs to get resolved before the hearing. So I don't disagree with you.
So I guess this is an important issue that we'll have to put on the agenda for next month to kind of track Don and Jerry to see where the resolution is.
Sounds and I'm happy to report back. I mean, it was covering for Brianna, and again, apologize about the connectional issues, but I'll make sure that she's up to speed if, you know, in the next month that on this. So I'll dive into this, see what, you know, where we're at in the process. I mean, you know, bottom line is I don't mind calling Mark at the State Street and saying, you know, this is something that really needs to get resolved as well. Wherever we're at in the process. I mean, we may have missed the boat, but I think if we haven't missed the boat, you know, there are other mechanisms here. We have a good relationship with Matt Rozelle, and I talk all the time with Clackamas County. He's their building official, and I'm happy to see what I can do to move that along. So that site distance issue is being looked at and addressed.
Yeah, I have an idea how to fix this.
Okay.
You guys did.
We'll work it out, and I'll run it by you later, Don.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
And so I guess it's a big major issue. You folks feel we should delay further discussion until next month?
Yeah, I make a motion that we need to make sure that this gets addressed next month to figure out what city's gonna do about it.
Okay.
Because that sounds like a city
I can
issue.
second that.
All right.
Obviously, we need to.
Is there any other issues that we need to address? I mean, I know one was trash pickup. If we were strict parking on one side, where would trash? And I talked to our trash Canby disposal, and their response was fairly simple. They said, if you can't put your trash can on your side of the street, put it on the opposite side of the street. And they would pick it up. So that shouldn't be necessarily an impediment for us to move forward. Are there any other issues that you want resolved on this slideshow or this discussion that we can have? Doing this next month, I can research and try to give us answers. There's a definite.
I think getting the information, the review between Don and Public Works to kind of discern what can and needs to be done so that we can have their more final recommendations to tie into what we're doing would be the best way to be able to move it forward.
Right, but are they, that regards the setbacks on the entrance to the development? Is there any other information that you folks need to be able to make a decision on the slideshow recommendations?
Well, I don't have a decision on this,
Yeah,
but the information you provided for me, Bob, made sense. You know what I mean? There's choices to be made.
Yes.
And it's you guys, I think should be able to, with all that information, be able to make a recommendation. But if there's anything you guys need from me, let me know too.
Sure.
You know,
You have always been really
Okay.
cooperative.
or Spencer, you know, anything you need from us, let us know outside before our next meeting. We'll get that to you as soon as we can.
Yeah, and I just want, if there are other questions, I would love to be able to research them and just give you the information you need so that you can make an informed decision, okay? You don't have to agree with me. You just gotta make an informed decision so we can get this project topic moving.
Yeah.
Going.
I agree.
All right. New business. Development review process information. And I turn that over to Jerry.
Yeah, so Bob, I've been working with Bob Canberra for a little bit now, just on this stuff that Jenny's been talking about and just going over it. So I invited him down to Public Works and he came down and we went over Public Works process so that he could see how we navigate through all of this stuff, working with the planning department and everything else. And I actually invited him to one of our, we have several meetings before through the process of development, and it goes through a pre-application process. After a pre-application process, we then have added another meeting, and it's a utility meeting for all the utility providers to get together and give planning department information before it goes to planning commission, so that the developers aren't finding out later that there's stuff they need to do, you know, because it gets expensive for them. So it's been, Dawn's been appreciative of it. I know planning people like it. And so after that, it goes to the planning commission, it comes back, and then we have a pre-construction meeting. So this other meeting has really helped us streamline this, getting ahead of stuff and doing it. So the other thing that I was, with all of fire, other utility providers and all that stuff, I went and asked the city administrator and the city attorney if I could invite a traffic safety commission person to these meetings so that they could see our process, how we do it, and just have a feel on it. And we don't want them to comment or anything like that, create liability for the city for themselves, but they could go to the meetings, have input, maybe help us with making it better, or stuff that we miss through the traffic safety stuff. So yesterday, Bob attended his first meeting, and I thought it was great. I was glad to have him there, and I just wanted you guys to maybe talk about having a representative attend those. So that's kind of, that sum it up, Bob?
Yes, it was a very gracious invitation from Public Works to invite us front end, you know, not to get involved with whether we think a development is appropriate or not. That's not the point. The point is to look from the lens of a traffic safety committee person. Is there traffic safety concerns that we should at least talk about front end so that Public Works can consider it? And instead of always dealing with issues back end, we should try to be forward, try to get into it as much as possible front end. And I thought that was very gracious of it, and I think that's a real good pre-thinking, and I appreciate what Public Works and Planning Department is doing. So I would recommend that we accept the invitation.
What's their meetings?
They vary, and so I don't know if you want to have a representative or if you want to rotate around so everyone can experience it. We have 3 meetings per development, right? We have pre-app, pre-planning, and then we have pre-con. So whatever you guys, maybe you guys could have a discussion, see what you want to do with that. If you want one, maybe multiple, whatever. We have room, we can Zoom, but you're welcome. However you guys want to proceed that. We just want to make sure, like Bob's saying, just looking through a lens, I like that, through traffic safety, so that Spencer and his team don't have to go out and paint later and do stuff like that. It's just, you know, something that, and it doesn't have to be, nothing would be spoken in that meeting, but input would be after the meeting where we could add and
also transparency.
Yeah, you guys can see what we do and you can see how swamped the planning department is and, you know, all that and what we, you know, meet all our utility providers. But I don't know how you proceed from here, how you decide who's gonna do it, what you're gonna do, Bob, but that's up to you guys.
Yeah, if there are no objections, we're gonna accept the invitation.
I agree.
And,
Yay.
and then what I'll do is, I'll bring it back next month. I will try to unofficially be our representative for first 1 or 2 times, so I can really understand, and then bring in people. I know quite a few of you have jobs, and these meetings would,
They're around 10, they're like at 10 o'clock midweek, most of them. That's what we try to do, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday.
How long do they usually last?
It depends on what it is. If it's organized, it'll last half an hour. If it's kind of a top one, like what Jenny's talking about, it could go a couple hours.
No, I have a really flexible job.
I have one too, so. they're
Yeah, me
pretty
too.
awesome.
so maybe that one of my thoughts was to organize it by project. That if somebody took it on, they would follow the project right through, which could be that you would attend 1 or 2 meetings so that they would be
I think it's a
continuity,
breakdowns happen pretty well.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good
Agree.
idea.
you know? And as long as we all, next month, we can talk about our perspective. That when you go to the meeting, you're not there to, push for the project or against the project, but to look through the lens of, like they do at Public Works and
Try to control the patient.
well,
No, yeah.
yeah. It's like the lens that the Public Works and the utilities and can be direct link, we're all looking through, which was, okay, what do we need to have done to make this a successful project? And a safe project for the city. So you're looking through that lens as opposed to any other lens,
Yeah.
So that we are a contributing member of the committee and all come from the same point of view. So we can talk about that next time. Yes.
May I ask 2 quick questions? So about how far in advance would we know that one of these meetings is going to happen? Is it like a week, 2 weeks, a month, just ballpark?
It depends on the situation, but most of the time we have pretty good notice. But I think like if we have planners on vacation and we've lost planners and stuff like that, it piles up in there. So some stuff might come in pretty short notice, like 5-day notice or something like that. But most of the time they give us a really good, several 2 weeks. What do you say, we get 2-3 weeks?
We usually are right around
2-3 weeks to go for this. Rhonda really tries to be proactive on getting it out to people on that. So
Yeah, that seems pretty manageable. And question number 2 is, are the pre-review, the pre-application reviews going to become a requirement moving forward as opposed to an optional like it was with Star Project?
like what we're doing with utility providers, our pre-review. Yeah.
I think it, because there's the 3 levels of review. Like it's out. I was told when we were working with Eric that the pre-review was kind of optional and it did not always happen. So that was the case with the State Street project, and I wasn't sure if moving forward it was going to be a little bit more insistent that they all had that.
What Eric means by that, I believe, is they're always going to happen now. But if it's some sort of like, we're building a pickleball court at Maple Park where there was already a pickleball court, I don't think we would need that pre-review. It would just be, we would just replace it. It would go through planning commission. We'd never hear about it because it doesn't affect us. But any type of, anything in the public right of way, traffic studies, we would have this meeting, Jenny.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm going to start having my engineer there to report back on the traffic studies so that we can talk about that before planning commission too. So we will have those on anything that involves any type of public stuff.
And Jenny, just maybe a little further on that, there's a code that just went through the council, will become official, defining pre-application processes a little more clearly in the code. And it's my discretion, but anything that's a type 2 or 3 is going to go through a pre-app process at my call. Type 1s are optional. You're not going to see a lot of type 1s. Those are administrative, they're minor, or they're just essentially things between the applicant and the planning department. They're not significant. But that's a clarification. And the other part of that is that pre-apps are now going to only be good for 1 year. And then if somebody takes longer than that, they're going to have to repeat that process.
That's good news.
Yeah, we've had some people where we highly encourage them, but people don't always take the lead. And then they have a really rough time, and it's like, well, you probably should have not skipped the pre-app. So that's not going to be an option in the future. So there's a bundle, I'm kind of jumping ahead, but there's a bundle of code updates that will be effective in about 30 days. And that's one of them.
Are those available for review somewhere?
Yeah, they're online actually and I could send you the link to that. I forget which hearing that was, like the council hearing.
About 2 or 3 weeks ago.
It was about 2 weeks. Yeah, it was about 2 weeks ago. So in that giant package, there is a track change, series of things in there. There's also procedural changes that are going to happen on how hearings take place, and the role of the applicant taking a much greater burden in terms of their presentation. Staff will take a much smaller amount of time to introduce the project, but we are not the applicant, and we shouldn't be speaking for 45 minutes on the application. That should be the applicant speaking. So that's another piece that's going through.
That would be nice, because that will help change some of the errors that were in the information that was coming from you guys trying to interpret stuff, and that other people didn't have an opportunity to contest. So that's all great news, and I'd appreciate the link.
Okay. Yep.
Thank you. So we will put that on the agenda for next time to make it work. I will kind of shepherd, learn a little bit about as we go through this coming month. And I may call on one of you if it becomes too much of a flow. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay. CIP priority discussion.
Yes. Want me to talk about it?
Sure.
Okay, so for the last, I don't know, decade or so, maybe longer, I've been working with the Traffic Safety Committee, and just listening, complaints, road projects, everything else, and I've just created kind of a 5-year CIP off of that, without much help, without much input. All of them are good projects and everything else, and we are just adopting this year's budget with the current CIP, but I was wondering if this group wanted to help you work on that, maybe get it organized and everything for the following budget so that we could stay on track, because all of them are good projects, but maybe we could have some community input on prioritizing and how we time. Once we get our new finance director, Eric, gets going here and up to speed, we're going to have a real good grasp on SDC funds, what we have. We're building the Walnut Street project, South Ivy Street improvements. We got a lot of big projects, but we have a lot of little projects currently, like Locust Street, 10th Avenue, or the four-way stop at Territorial. That's all been out to bid. We're waiting for the 30 days in council, and we're going to be able to start on that. So that was one of the projects on my CIP. So Bob, if we wanted to, as a group, start working on that in the future, I could bring the list that I have. Maybe if we're at Public Works, we're down there, I can bring that up and we can start talking about that on what everyone thinks, especially since we got people from all areas that can be in here. I think we got, yeah, and I don't live here. I commute here every day, so I don't really have an opinion on it. I just want to keep doing projects and keep moving forward, especially a priority of us at Public Works is getting rid of gravel shoulders. We don't want to have any more of those in Canby. So we want paved streets and sidewalks.
Yes.
And that's a good discussion. I'm trying to be mindful of your time because I'm bringing in big issues, here. I think we should strive to play a part in making recommendations. Not that we're going to be able to, guarantee that something is going to go our way, but we, temper it by saying that we can make recommendations to where we think a roadway is unsafe and needs some improvement, and making sure that moves toward someplace on the CIP, which is the capital improvement budget list, okay?
Thank you. I was dying to know what CIP was.
I should have said that, my fault.
That's okay.
So I thought VIP was very important.
And if you look at, if you want details on it, please go to the budget, the annual budget on the city website. And I believe it's page 84 and 85. As you scroll, the document says 36.
Yeah, okay.
The document says 36, but if you have to scroll down, it's about 85 or 80, 84 or 85. So, you know.
On the PDF. Okay.
Computer, it's 84, 85. On paper, it's page 36. I track that religiously, to tell you the truth, because I'm quirky about it. And Jerry's getting tired of listening to me.
No, but
I'm
Bob,
only
we've
kidding.
gotten a couple of them roads done that you wanted, so let's keep, and they're good for the community, so let's keep
And I
going.
think part of that whole discussion gives us an opportunity to really have a discussion about what we think is a good criteria. You know, when I look at my decisions should be based upon certain criteria, like, you know, things like, is this a busy street, what we call a feeder street or a connector street, as opposed to a small neighborhood turnabout? Is it a street that is in disrepair, you know, doesn't have curves on both sides? Is it a street that provides a problem with pedestrian and traffic interface because they don't have sidewalks? So you're always having pedestrians weaving, you know, that are going to get run over someday. And is it a busy street as far as from the perspective of the city? Does it connect to things that are important? And such as a good example to think about is Locust. This fits all those criteria. It's a Locust going down from 10th Street to the city center is a fairly frequently used street. It connects those things. It's a busy street. It's located around the fairground, which at fair time is a mess with people. And it does not have sidewalks. And it is got a lot of potholes.
Yes.
And it has no curves. So when you look at those kinds of things, it jumps at you, right? That it's in the best interest of the community to be developed. And that's the kind of discussions that we should have. But I don't know every street in town. But with you folks being from every different areas, that kind of brings things to discussion. So I think this is a meaningful, one more time, forward thinking instead of reacting, you know? So does everybody agree that this is a good idea?
Oh, heck yes, I'm on board.
Okay. So we will put it on discussion to, at least next time, to talk about, before we get into talking about what's on the thing, let's put on your thinking caps about criteria. What kind of criteria should be used for looking at CIP projects, okay?
Are all of those CIP projects going to have line items for how much they cost? And do we know roughly what the budget allotment is?
Yep, it's on there, Jenny. They might not be perfectly accurate because of inflation right now, but I had engineers. Yeah, take a look at it. It's pretty interesting when you look at it. And call me if you have any questions on it.
Yeah, you can look at that page list. Now, these are just the projections, okay? Nothing is in stone from what I've learned.
It is not.
Because, you know, the city council can change, something comes up and another project rises to the emergency level or, you know, of much more importance. And so things get pushed out. But looking at it gives you a feel for it and the ability to track it. And you have to go have patience. But sometimes it takes years, but persons whose has stick-to-itiveness will make things happen. Okay, so we'll continue that discussion. That's terrific. City staff reports. Police not here. Planning. John has.
Yeah, and just small segue from what Jerry, great information on the CIP and the transportation system plan and the comprehensive plan. We're going to be going out, we're assuming we're going to be going out if council approves the budget package on June 15th for both those. We'll solicit an RFP to hire a consulting firm and a transportation firm to take us through. And the transportation system plan update will include updated calculations for roads as well, along with updated system development charges, which do need to happen so that people are paying what it really, they're paying into the system proportionate to the cost of the road inflationary index. So that's kind of on the horizon. Currently, we're working on the housing needs analysis and economic opportunity analysis processes. Our second meetings for those, we have the economic one, we have a meeting on Thursday, and the housing got pushed out because of the state championship. It was supposed to be last night. So that's going to happen on the 28th of this month. Kind of in a thumbnail, both of those processes will identify 20-year population forecast for the city, which is about 6,000 people. And then how does that get accommodated with the current land base? And so there's a buildable land analysis that's evaluating that. That whole evaluation process really kind of is state driven, but it will identify, is there enough available land to accommodate that population for 20 years? That's a state requirement for residential. On the employment side, it'll be more of a formula of where does the city want to go in terms of employment, what type of employment. As far as those processes go, I see this board as being really, really important. And I definitely, Bob, as you and I have talked, I think it'd be really important to have the voice of this board, especially on the transportation system plan. There'll be a number of advisory groups that we'll have for both the comp plan and the transportation system plan. I see this group as providing a lot of valuable information into that process. That'll look more holistically at things like, traffic circulation, road standards, parking, those kinds of things that are probably really important for us to, kind of bring up to current review so that we're all on board as to where we're going in the future. That comprehensive plan, transportation system plan, I'm hoping that if we get funded for that for the council, we'd start it hopefully November this year. It'll run probably a couple years in that process. We will be taking input from that process, like the transportation system plan, looking at things like the consultant being charged with parking issues and, should our standards be changed? And so while we're going through the comp plan process, once we have the information on, parking, which might be, within the first year, we'll start looking at adjusting parking standards. So we'll deal with things like enterprise where, Jenny, did you have a question?
No, I didn't. I was sorry. I was hoping at the end of your sentence. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Sure. No worries. So like things like enterprise and like, having a standard for rental spaces or use categories, which it's almost impossible to capture every single land use in a zoning code. And we have kind of a little bit of an older code in that sense, where we try to guess at what the general things would be. Sometimes there's outliers and, we get new things. I mean, at one point, drive-through coffee shops were something that became a big rave, and like, how do you deal with those? So I just think we need to really be more quantitative about if you have, a fleet of cars or if you've got a drive-through, we need to relook at a lot of stuff. Parking is a pretty particular issue in the town. I understand that some lots they never were designed well to begin with. And like, I think part of that is a reconsideration of like, is there adequate parking? Is there not? Is an important element. And that goes the other direction too on the industrial side. So looking at, is that too much? Are we asking for too much asphalt to be put down for the type of activities? So we've got those things going on. Then we did replace Eric Forcell. We have a lady named Emma coming on board on next Monday. And she is going to join us. And so about 2 months, we were able to secure somebody, and I think she's going to be really good. She has some city background experience, and she's also worked for Angelo Planning Group most recently. So I think she'll be a good add. She was working in Sandy previously before she worked for Angelo. I think she'll be a really good addition. Looking forward to having her come on. That's kind of it for us for now. Oh, the code stuff, Jenny, I'll send that to you, the link to that, but we'll continue to look at, what we're calling low hanging fruit. Eventually we're going to need to revise our whole code. I mean, I think there's a number of issues that we see that like we can address and just take on and be done with them. But the code, I think overall needs some integration review and kind of just bringing it up to par. We're going to do a number of sections of the code, but I mean, the whole structure of the code needs to be kind of, I think, relooked at. That would include public work standards and marrying those with planning standards, so there's not conflicts in the code. Those kinds of things need to be addressed. That's forthcoming. That would be something out there that we anticipate doing. In the meantime, as stuff comes up, we'll be addressing them. And as I mentioned, we did a bunch of things with this, kind of addressing code updates with the council just recently. And I think those will be helpful to set the stage that the applicant has the burden of proof to go through a process. Staff is still going to, evaluate everything, and the length of staff reports will not decrease, but our presentations will be decreased, and the applicants will need to carry more of the substantiation of the project. It's just a weird structure that we had in our code where staff always went first, which I'm not sure why, because I've never seen that anywhere else, but that's changing. So that's it. A lot more to come in terms of information, but I'm excited about this group being engaged in the comp plan and the transportation system plan, along with the other stakeholders, including Public Works, Fire, Canby Utility, all the folks that need to be involved with those discussions. That was it for planning.
Any comments? Thank you, Don. Oh, go ahead, Jenna.
May I ask, with the TSB being done and then the housing and economic evaluations, the original TSB, actually, I think it was the TSP, it refers to housing costs as part of the analysis for what's needed and what people can afford. And at this point, Clackamas County, Multnomah County, Marion County just got added to the list of cities that are considered unaffordable just across the board throughout the country. And part of the reason parking is so important is, when you're building apartments, such as the ones behind me, that cost as much as a $400,000 mortgage, you're going to have a lot of people who need to work to be able to afford that. And therefore, those people need cars, because Canby is not Portland Metro even, and you can't just hop on a bus and go to work. You're going to have a car. And that's my biggest concern, is making sure that when we're doing these different analyses, that they're not in their own silos, that we are actually looking at what is honest to God affordable housing. And if there is not affordable housing, what does it actually take? How many people at the average working full-time wage does it take to afford a 1-bedroom and a 2-bedroom apartment in this city moving forward? Because those people need cars. And that is the big distance that we have between our current code, which I'm told is very demanding compared to other cities in terms of what we're even asking for, and that the expectation should be that we're going to see less parking demands on developers, and really how problematic that is in reality for the city moving forward.
And you're raising a really good question. We have some of the information on demographics now with the housing analysis that's been done by our consultants, and so we know what the general kind of demographics of the city are. Just kind of rough numbers here, and these need to kind of get further vetted, but there were something like 158 acres of needed single family detached, 158 acres for single family detached. There was about 12 acres of high density multifamily residential that was needed. And there was actually a slight surplus of medium density residential, about 23 acres. These numbers are again kind of rough. So those are going to need to be addressed and vetted through the state review process, which includes things like the golf course will never convert to housing, because that's kind of crazy to think that, because that's 150 acres there. So, I mean, it would be a huge challenge. And so part of this is like, to your point, I think there's the need to try to help with affordability. I think there's also this notion that affordability is related to parking. And I think some of that is up to the city to determine how those kind of come together. I'm more of a proponent of like, we have some people in town, for example, on the outskirts of town that want to do more, high density residential, out that's not in the city, that's out by the spinning wheel, that want to be by Walnut Street. That may be an appropriate place for that. To have those, and that may make up for most of the high density residential. There also could be maybe new areas that are added to the city that have a mix of uses. That could be both single family and other products types there. So that's still kind of being sorted as to that issue. And then perhaps, things like the Dahlia, could there be another Dahlia too? Those are all part of the discussion as to what those are. And I think parking is important. I think we are not Portland. So kind of what should we be and what should those standards be? And that's kind of all part of that discussion as that moves ahead. From the state perspective, they're pretty much advocates, and this is more in the metro area, of limiting parking requirements. And you see that a lot in the metro area. I think, some of that is really, I would have a hard time believing we would be moving to zero parking. I mean, I don't see that happening for multifamily in the city of Canby, but what should that be? And that's part of that discussion, is what should that number be? I just don't think we're going to be the same as the metro area. We're not, as you said, we don't have transit that links us as well as some of the other parts. And we're kind of a little bit in a weird spot because we're kind of isolated as well. So, how do we deal with that? And this gets into like that discussion about what the adequacy, looking at the transportation system plan, looking at parking, and then updating the parking code, and how do we address that? But I think big concern is of housing affordability. I think part of that is what kind of product types would be most attractive, and things that would be more accepted in the city of Canby. What are those types of products? And then parking associated with that would be an important consideration.
Is your position that we need to have parking in alignment with what it costs to have these apartments, that we need to focus on that more? Because anybody can talk about affordability, but nobody's going to build actually affordable housing or apartments, whatever, because that's not what the market is. We're not going to just magically have $500 apartments. It's never going to happen. So if it's never going to truly be affordable, then what does it look like for people to live in what is going to be available?
Well, and I think some of those are council decision items, like, do we adjust system development charges downward for providing for multifamily? That's a question, that's a policy question. In exchange for the assumption or maybe the partnership that we end up having rental rates that are like more favorable. I agree with you that it's really difficult to control the fair market. I mean, it's super difficult. So what does the city have in its kind of toolbox to try to help lessen that, so that it is more affordable? Because I think apartments are extremely non-affordable right now. I mean, to your point, I think had you gotten into a mortgage before, you're probably paying almost as much, if not more, as you would in an apartment than you were when you had a mortgage, if you had already gotten into one. So those are strategies that need to get kind of ironed out. Those would be things that the council would be involved with. They'll have recommendations from our consultant about what are the strategies that we should be going forward with. That'll be an open public process. We'll have an open house that we're looking, I think it was July 14th for that open house for combined housing and economic review. and there'll be two other after these advisory committees, two other advisory committees that will end up meeting on that. And then there'll be recommendations that'll go to planning commission and council for that. That will then kind of set the stage as we go into the comp plan process, which will kind of memorialize, if we are looking at trying to achieve those, objectives as to where the housing should go. And then you're getting into development standards, which I think is another aspect of that. And that it's going to take a little time to kind of get to that point, but that there will be a discussion around, development standards as well, as to what those should be, including parking.
Well, for what it's worth, I hope that you continue to advocate for that, because I do think the city needs it, and you're in a position to do it where a lot of us aren't.
Yeah.
Don, I applaud you for pushing hard to get this whole planning process and review process going. It's something that the city has needed for a number of years, but for various reasons wasn't able to start. And I applaud you. And as I've said before, if you need any type of testimony or recommendations to go with you from this committee, we encourage any type of future planning that will help us move us into the future. So we totally support that, I'm sure.
Thank you, Bob. Absolutely. And that, as we've talked before, I think, there will be reach outs, and I'll make sure you're in the loop on what we're doing and kind of as we're moving forward. I mean, I think it's really important that we have all the voices in the city. This is one body here of important voices, but we hear, all the voice. That's kind of the objective here. And so then the council has the decision-making process of basically saying, okay, with all this information, what are we going to do here? I think there's been a little bit of a lack of that, to be honest with you, about that not being a focus where, the end result here is I want this to be community driven. Whatever we end up with should be, staff has we have recommendations, but, part of that is we want the community input about what is your future. This is your future. And it's way better to plan for it than to be reactive to stuff. And I think that's part of what we're trying to achieve, is just being forward thinking about like, what are we doing collectively? So we're not like, there always will be controversial issues around development, but like, if we can at least have a core set of agreements on direction, I think that will help us.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Public Works. Have anything to report?
First,
You've done a lot of work today already.
got a few things. We've been working on budget, so we've got that all kind of tidied up and waiting for approval on that. So that's exciting. Thanks to the planning department, I think planning, the traffic safety, we got that crosswalk installed across Territorial at Locust. We got the ADA ramps in, we're waiting to strike. But that's good news. I've been working with the neighborhood. So people from Auburn Farms will be able to, their kids and stuff will have a place to safely cross to get over to the splash pad. The quiet zone, we're wrapping up. I think Spencer could talk about that if he wants. Spencer and his team's on phase 2 of undergrounding the power on Ivy. That's going well. Slow, but it's going well. It's expensive, but we're getting it done. The Public Works crew's got all the baskets, and they planted dahlias and all the flower planters around town. So you'll see dahlias coming up, which we're always excited to do. The other thing is we entered into an agreement with Harper Huff, and they're going to be helping us redo our Logging Road Bridge over 99. Some painting, maybe some arts. We're just getting started on that, which is exciting. So that's in progress. The other thing I wanted to let you know, I just shared it with you, Bob. Maybe you want to share it with the Traffic Safety Committee. Jamie Stickle put out a press release and stuff, and it's for the ribbon cutting for the pickleball courts. We're doing that June 16th at 4 p.m. And she says in this, I got to quote her, it's a ribbon cutting like you've never seen. So I'm dying to know what that's about. And the last thing I have is, Dawn, do you know, are we doing the public input for the Parks Master Plan tonight?
Yes, there's a forum tonight, starting at 6 at the police station. Yes, that part of this is a presentation, Jerry, and I don't really know what the consultant is going to do, but part of that is to get commentary. I don't really know the full detail if that's gonna, I think the objective here is to get people to comment verbally. There may be an opportunity to provide written comment as well, but yes, tonight we're public, it's a follow-up from the work session that council had on the Parks Master Plan to get the public input on that. And so, yes, and so folks want to participate, that'd be great. It's been a long journey going through this process. Kind of more the dialing in piece of this now, which I think is getting to like priorities, collection of system development charges, what should they be? Those are kind of the main things, and that will help set the stage for the direction in the future. I know there's a lot of aspirational objectives for everything from dog parks to sports fields. So those are all part of that discussion.
So come to that if you guys want, and then do you want to fill in on before we stop? I'll let us consider. That's all I have.
Yeah, so the four-way stop, the contract will be awarded sometime in mid-July. Notice to proceed for the contractor will be around that time. I don't remember what their window of to get to substantial completion, so it'll be kind of late summer, early fall is when work over there will be done. With the sidewalks going in on the north side of Territorial and a four-way stop going in with another crosswalk painted there for crossing Territorial and for crossing Redwood. And then for the quiet zone, we have a meeting with the railroad, I believe July 14th was the earliest that they can come out here for signing off and saying that the engineers no longer have to honk their horns. That doesn't mean that they won't, but it's up to the discretion of the engineer driving the train. But we're excited for that to finally be done and over with. Then kind of the only other thing I had was we had talked last time about setting up the radar and getting a rotating each month for just collecting data, and kind of the list of streets that I have that I'm going to kind of work off of each month, just going and setting it in new places is Territorial, North Redwood, North 10th, North Pine, and then probably on Knightsbridge Road for the north side, and then on the south side, Township, South Ivy, South Elm, 13th, and then Burke Parkway. And talking with Bob is I don't think that any of those were a definite each month that that's what we were going to do. If we decided at a meeting that there was another road that wasn't on that list that we needed to maybe try and get some information on, that it'd be easy to bump one of those. But then it'll just be interesting coming up with 10 or 12 of them. It'll be about a year that we can come back and look at each one of those and compare them. Currently right now it's over on Township, so if you're driving that way, so don't be speeding too much, or see if you can get the high score, I guess.
So Spencer, are you saying that list has 12 locations on it and that you're rotating it each month?
Yes. So each month, I'll give Bob and I send it out to everybody. Bob's really good about kind of condensing down all of that information and resending it out to everybody with a little bit more of a bulletinized list, whereas I send out all of the information. As if you're really, really bored and looking for something to do, you can read through 100 pages of car data. But Bob is very good about going through and making it a little bit more readable and digestible.
Do we have another one that can kind of pop up different other places periodically, or does that mean that the machinery is spoken for? all the time.
There, we do have a device, and I'm gonna bring that up when we talk about, the concern by, what's her name? Barbara Kamel, in a minute. It's the police wagon, and it can flash, and give warning to people, but it doesn't collect data, I think.
No, it doesn't, and it doesn't always operate, because one time, one of the digits wasn't even working, and I had to alert them, and they ended up pulling it away,
Yeah,
because we used it in our neighborhood.
and so it is a mechanism that is available. And I'll talk about that. Okay, thank you very much. By the way, your pickleball,
Yes,
they're doing a really good job of painting it.
yeah, it's gonna
They've
come
got
great.
two paint, the green and the blue done. I guess they just gotta paint the stripes. I know only because I walk by that park every day. Okay, moving on. City council liaison isn't here and fire district is not. Board member reports, Deanne, do you have anything?
Yeah, I have a couple things. Last month I brought it up, over at Dutch Brothers. There is the new bar place. It's been there for probably a year. Yeah, they, have their outdoor seating and they're picking up 3 spots. They have 2 spots and a handicap spot. And last night I happened to be going into that complex, parking area. And somebody who was trying to park that was handicapped, had to go over by Dutch Brothers, turn around because the handicap spot that they wanted to take, they could not because of this establishment of the outdoor seating. And last month I was brought up that they don't even have a permit. So how is it still
I
around?
have somebody from the city who's gonna take care of it.
Yeah.
Tracy was gonna, Tracy Hensley, council, was gonna look into that. And we had a very long conversation about this at, I think, the last council meeting. So the city's working on it.
Oh, okay.
Bob, you want me to reach out to Tracy to see what she found out on that, or
That'd
you
be
wanna?
good. Or, you know.
I just want to bring it up because I don't want it to go
It's-
away.
It is being worked on.
Oh,
I know that.
Tracy, it was another lady that was from the city.
I thought it was with the planning commission, but
Deanna, can I have some updates from that I'd like to give you as well. So that's the FOB you're speaking about, the FOB tap room, is that correct?
correct.
Okay. So their outdoor seating program, which was a COVID-related program, the council decided to sunset that program at the end of June for outdoor seating. Council also gave planning department direction on trying to move forward with something more permanent for circumstances that would warrant being more permanent. That would be a policy decision over time, and that program is probably going to take at least 9 months for us to come back and develop something that's for outdoor seating, and have to be not only for FOB, but it'd have to be for stuff beyond that. I have met with the owner of FOB, met last week, and really there's not a lot of options for them currently because the temporary vendor permit doesn't permit them to be there either. So the outdoor seating program, again, was a COVID-driven program, and the council's chosen to basically sunset that program. So kind of where does that leave us in terms of going forward? I mean, essentially, if there is another program that's developed, it's going to take planning department a while to do that, like we did for food carts. That took a year to get that approved. And I'm guessing that would probably take a similar amount of time for the outdoor program to address that. And we do have a sidewalk seating program already. So this is kind of probably going to focus largely on, is there, as a policy direction, should we allow any kind of permanent occupancy of parking spaces, whether they be in a private lot or on a public street, and under what circumstances? And so that parking complex that is where FOB is not in a great position to get leniency because of the fact that parking was not really substantial in that complex. And actually the record, going back into the records, there was also an adjustment, or sorry, a modification made to make exception to the parking in that complex, which makes it not possible for them to use a temporary vendor permit. The outdoor seating program was run by our economic development department. And so that's that was that umbrella of that. So essentially there's not a lot of options for FOB. There's, really at the end of June, they're supposed to be out of there unless the council decides to somehow extend that outdoor seating program. So that's what I know at this point. And that's just kind of giving you the full discussion on that.
Okay, I appreciate it. I just am watching it because I just don't like knowing that handicap spot is being taken when there's limited parking over there for people anyway.
And I get that. I think, just maybe one little small thing. I don't want to dive too deep on this, but the owner did in fact coordinate, he said, with Clackamas County. They relocated 2 disabled spots that were further away, that are still in that general proximity. And apparently the county said that was sufficient in terms of like where they were put, and reviewed them according to the owner. That still doesn't really address the overall adequacy of parking in that complex, but just for your information, at least from an ADA perspective, from the owner, that they've met what is technically required. The county is kind of enforcing that on private lots because they're doing occupancy reviews, and that's kind of their purview, is to look at ADA spaces. The bigger there's that, I understand that issue. We're kind of relying on the county for ADA review. The planning department really is probably more focused in ADA is important, but like equally important is having adequate parking, generally speaking. And that's, where people are complaining, and it's not just this board, but people have complained. And so we've taken that into consideration. And so I don't have a lot of options for FOB. I don't have any planning tools outside of a new ordinance that would be developed, if that even were able to be something that would apply. And I think it would be difficult to make a argument that would be something we would be able to provide standards for. It would be super difficult when you have surplus parking. It's a lot easier. If you have surplus parking, we can make adjustments and stuff, or if parking is not required, like it is in downtown, there may be options that aren't available when you have a private parking lot and it doesn't currently meet the standards now. So especially when people are concerned about it.
Yeah. And then my other concern is on, and thank you for your clarification and everything. My other concern is on 13th Street, and I don't know why it wasn't done in the beginning back in the 90s, but when you are on 13th Burke Parkway over by the softball fields, there is sidewalks that are there, except for one little strip, which is part of Cedar Loop.
Oh, yeah, that's a nice one.
Yeah, and I'm just like, now I'm kind of like curious why the sidewalk was never put in there, because you have a sidewalk all the way on the other side, but not on the side closest to the softball field. And the last couple of years, this year in particular, I've seen it more, just because I see people walking and they end up going through grass or the street. And on the street, I worry because you have a bike lane and you have parking. And so I'm waiting for a close call one of these days because I live over there. But I'm just kind of curious how we can implement getting like a sidewalk in that little spot.
Is this across from the softball or the other side of the street?
It's right across the Mormon church on the right side, across from right.
Yeah, it's right across from Rathline House.
You know where Mr. Paul used to live?
It's a private, it may be,
Where our old storm sampling drywall was.
Yeah.
Right there.
We must not have right of way or something.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm wondering is,
There's no sidewalk there?
there's no sidewalk.
It's all grass.
It's all grass.
So when you're walking your dog, you're having to like walk in the grass or in the street, because if there's a car there, then you're definitely in the street.
Now, this would be the advantage of being in Public Works.
I know, I could bring it up on our.
Yeah. I should have taken a picture before I left, but.
Hmm.
Would you get right here in that private?
Gotcha. So it's in between the two driveways.
And I don't know why, like back
We
in the
didn't.
nineties, a developer wasn't told to put a sidewalk there. So I'm just kind of curious, because it's 13, because it's off of 13.
We must not have right away.
Okay. Okay.
You can see this, it's an interesting problem in the whole city. You can have sidewalks and then a gap.
And if we didn't get the right of way when they developed, then we can't. And then they didn't force them to put it in back then. It's a tough one to.
Yeah.
Because we would have put the walk in with our project if we.
We should have a brother turn a wheelchair.
But I'll go back to Public Works and look at how much right of way we have through there and see.
If you don't mind checking, because I am part of the HOA board too, and I'm just concerned, because I would have brought it up when the ADA ramps were going in, but then I thought, well, maybe it's something
Your
like the
HOA
HOA needs to do.
Board for that area, for
Yeah.
that,
For Cedar
would
Ridge.
you guys consider putting sidewalks in?
Well, I can bring it up to the board, but I'm just wondering if it is part of, if, my concern is 13th Street, because it's on 13th Street. So I'm not sure if it is, would be city, because city did the others. They
It
just
would
left that
be,
spot.
it would be up to them.
Okay.
And we'd have to really justify it to put it in on city nickel, because the property owners are in charge of the sidewalks. Unless, the only sidewalk the city owns is in front of city buildings.
Oh, okay.
We're treated just like property owners,
Okay.
which would be ideal. What would be awesome if they had some money that, I mean, we'd even work with planning on the fees and fast tracking through. If they want to put that in, we would really appreciate it,
Okay.
you know, but it would be up to the property owners to do that.
Okay. Okay. I'll bring it up to them then.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. Jackie, you have anything?
Yeah. I had a lot of complaints, I guess.
Okay.
Somehow people know I'm on traffic, so they tag me on Facebook. I try to do my best to address people.
You know, and I want you to bring those up. But, you know, one of the things is that I'm always concerned that citizens should be encouraged
That's
when you
great.
have complaints to come.
That was another complaint, is that citizens are concerned they can't bring their complaints because our meetings are during the day and we work. And they don't think it's fair that we don't have this inclusive. And I tell people like, if I could write in something,
I mean,
Not
they have a Zoom. Now they have.
but if people are at work, not everybody has a job. And they can do it. So I just wanted to make sure everybody's aware. That's why I
Yeah.
took it on to do this.
What's your heart?
People can't always,
And I try to when I have time if I see something.
it's just trying to be an advocate for the people that are,
Okay,
can't get time off. I mean, the only reason I'm here, usually
Correct.
I'm actually able to flex to get paid, but in the past, I've not been paid a year. And have to take time off from work, so I totally relate. So anyway, it's just the general stuff, people complaining about stop signs, or stops. And there's been an issue with multiple people about the stoplights between Sequoia, Redwood. They're shorter or something, you know?
Yes, I'm working on that.
Okay.
And I actually have got, what I've been directing people to do is to go to the Ask ODOT, and they,
Yeah, we got that in there.
yep, and I've been working, so we, Public Works has heard that concern.
And then when there's been speed concerns on, I refer people to the Kansas City page to put in the traffic complaint there.
pardon me, I didn't hear.
The county police, I've been referring people when they complain about speed or other things that are traffic that are more police related to go to the county police website and go to the traffic and make that complaint there.
Perfect.
And I give them the link because this, I don't think this is the place for us to keep talking about that. And I have my own concern. But when we were, the hotel on Elm Street behind there's that house. There's been people for the last like 2 or 3 weeks that keep parking right in front, right between the US Bank and that house. There's no parking there, there's not even room.
Yeah.
Some have been parking on the sidewalk.
Do we need to paint or do we need
Just
to?
need to paint or a good parking. There's, I mean, you could think there's no place, there's no road, you're in the
Bike
road.
lane there, and I think we have yellow curbs.
Well, let's start with painting, getting it so people, it's obvious that it's not parking.
It's been vacant for a while, I think, or nobody's been active in that all. They're trying to fix the house stuff. But then people have them go around and they reach me in the.
Okay.
And then just, most of it's been police stuff that I've just referred off.
Okay.
And then the quiet zone, there was a lot of concerns about that. It's a tragedy.
Yeah.
It's a tragedy that happened, with the train.
I know, it's
So,
a tough one.
yeah, so I just want to make sure that wasn't, people were aware that they have contacted the railroad.
Now, what is the real story? I heard one story, but you never know what you read on. I don't trust social media
Yeah.
explanations. Does anybody have a real idea what happened with that?
I talked to Chief Davis about it and it was, yeah, it was pretty bad. It was bad. And basically what was going on is the private train was loading and unloading and they were spread out here and this gentleman was crawling between them and had earbuds in and Amtrak was going by and like the second to last car on Amtrak caught him. He was
That's what I
climbing through the, and so the quiet, I'm not even positive on the location. I don't even know if it happened in the quiet zone area. I think it happened down
Well, there's
towards,
flowers over by Kirkway and Car Wash.
yeah, I think it was this somewhere out here, like somewhere straight out here. Yeah, I didn't know if it was down by
Somebody said
Walgreens.
that he was on his way to the store.
Yeah, I don't know the exact location, but,
In any case, you know, my assumption is that people make what I think are not, I feel sorry for the person passing away, but at the same time, people make decisions
Oh,
that
yeah.
I
endanger
know,
them,
It's
that
tragic.
endanger them, and there's nothing you can do to stop that, you know?
yeah, and it happened before our quiet zone was activated too.
Oh, yeah, there's been a tree out.
So Jackie, it's such an
I
unfortunate,
just bring
it's
it
so
up.
sad. Yeah.
I was asked to, but there was one concern, somebody said, are we addressing pedestrians with this quiet zone, not just cars?
Yeah, if you look at that was the biggest thing with it. That was the biggest concern with this quiet zone. And if you go look at what the striping, the ADA ramps,
That
the
was one of the
signal
big
stuff.
concerns with people was like, did we address pedestrians or?
And we pay a lot of money yearly now forever to make sure that those are updated and addressed with the railroads. So I don't know how you respond to that or anything like that because it's such a touchy subject.
Yeah, I didn't really respond, I just took note of it, I bring it here, so it's on record.
The other thing I wanted to add to that too, because a question came to our city administrator when he was out at Hope Village about striping. They had concerns about the striping, and I explained to him, the striping no longer has turn arrows in the old areas because of, I don't know if you guys remember years ago, we had a fatality because they didn't understand the turn arrows and they actually drove down the tracks and got hit by the car. So the striping is set up a certain way to not confuse traffic and to keep them in the dividers and all that help with that too.
Yeah,
So I just wanted to pass that on.
I remember that tragedy.
Yeah.
You know, let's see. Distracted driving is a real problem. Distracted walking is just as bad.
Yep.
When people put earbuds in their heads and keep walking around and they are unaware of what the cars are doing.
Yep. Being aware of your natural surroundings, we deal with it every day with what we do. You gotta be careful.
Okay.
I only have one more thing, is like, it was really nice to see how Dutch Brothers, the drive-through got reconfigured.
Oh.
Yeah,
Nice.
it's very nice, 'cause different, but
So,
people, it helps with the traffic flow.
so the only thing we really gotta do, Jackie, is try to address, making it clear that that's no parking over on that.
Yes.
Okay, that's, okay.
Yeah, I just, I mean, but you shouldn't have to do, because it's, if you're, it's obvious, like, I shouldn't park there.
Yeah, but people get
There's
one
too
part,
many
and it's
people that
okay.
Jennifer? Do you have anything?
I do. So I wanted to give you guys an update. I reached out to ODOT to ask for reports on the condition of 99 between Oregon City and Canby. My spam folder caught their response, so I didn't see it until yesterday. But I have it. I will pass it along to everybody. I didn't in advance of the meeting because I didn't want you guys to get it all last minute like you were supposed to have read it for this. But I'm going to pass that along. That's the road condition assessment was last done in 2020, and then do it every 2 years. And then they directed me to Clackamas County for assessments on earthquake stability for that same stretch of road. So if we want to pursue getting additional information on that front, then that would be the path forward. In terms of stuff really local here in town, I was wondering if we might be able to look at the cutback of the trees on Territorial at the intersections with Sequoia and, buddy, give me a hot second here.
Don't come back.
Dun, dun, dun. Let me see. It was at Sequoia and Molino Roads. So both of them, when you're coming on Territorial into town, you can't see the stop sign until you're really close. And for people who are in larger vehicles and or are driving fast, that definitely is a concern. I've noticed that for some time now, but with the summer trees all filled in, then it's that much more difficult to see them. So if we have that in our jurisdiction, it might be worth looking at trying to make those more visible.
Jenny, where
And
at?
that's all.
Yeah. and Michael-
Territorial at the intersection with Molino and Sequoia. Sequoia's even got little flags on it, but until you're pretty close, you don't see it. So,
Township?
yeah.
I
Township
don't-
heading into town.
Are you talking
If you're
about-
coming from Oregon City towards the steel plant.
That's township.
Okay, Township and Malino?
Yeah, sorry, my battery just died on me, so sorry if I'm saying the wrong thing. But yeah, Township, Molino, and Sequoia, where the cemetery is.
Oh,
At the cemetery.
at the cemetery. No, I know the trees. I know.
Yep.
So-
Yeah, so both of those intersections where they just built that, I think it's, I don't know what the industrial thing is, if that's the Amazon or something else, but those two intersections, they're fairly close to one another, but if you're on Township and heading towards the steel business, then both of them are obscured by trees.
Got it.
Cool, thank you.
Easy deal there.
I have just one issue, but it won't be something I'll talk in detail. I'll put it on the new business for next time. Is I think that we really do need to resurrect a discussion about the Red Flex computer system to track illegal left turns and speeding in the city.
Can I comment on that?
Let me just finish one thought. It is a long, I know it's a political discussion and things like that. I think it is important for us to do this because, you know, the city is growing. Speed is a constant complaint by everyone. And not only that, I'm concerned that, you know, the state is considering to put in tolls on the bridge in Oregon City. And it's already pretty common that will backflow to us. I think the city needs a mechanism to be able to control speeding, and the Red Flex is something that can be done. It's a political thing because in order for us to get to use the Red Flex system within the city as opposed to just ODOT, you need legislative approval.
I need someone to read it.
And I think we should be forward thinking in seeking that approval from the legislature And then it becomes the city council's decision whether to implement it. But getting legislative approval needs, as Don knows, takes a long time to move things along and get it approved. But I think you need to do that so that we have tools in that are available to us so that we can utilize them if we choose to. And then it doesn't happen. So I think I'm going to put on the agenda for a further discussion. Jerry.
I commute Ivy coming in, and 50% of the time, because I know I wait, someone runs the light.
Yeah.
And so, but this is so much bigger than Spencer and I. What I wanted to say is make sure we have all the big wheels in here for that conversation. So
yeah, I think it's something that I think it's really necessary because, I mean, you know how many complaints we get about speeding every month? It's ridiculous.
They all tag me.
And we have statistics.
it's
When
bad.
we talk about the territorial rule, I'll show you the speeding is crazy.
We have to do something.
And you don't have enough police officers to track this.
Even if you had one for each person, still.
I have
So I have a recommendation, Bob.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what we did last time and why it got shut down last time.
Well, I really think our approach was difficult to accept. Part of
Gotcha.
the argument was it could make money for law enforcement. I don't want a red flag system to make money. In fact, I want no tickets out of the reflect system because that would mean that nobody's speeding. I would hope the system is
You
invisible.
mean running red lights?
Yeah, running red lights,
I don't feel sorry for people with red lights.
speeding, put up lots of signs to say, don't speed. This has got a camera.
And it's gonna get worse, like Bob said, when 205 starts tolling, because I already know a lot of people go,
Wasn't
oh,
that
we'll go
police
through
chief that
Candy.
used it?
I thought
We
it was,
have, we have.
I thought it was Brett that shut it down, but I can't remember. I hate to blame Brett because I'm friends.
Well,
with
that's
him,
my
but
recollection.
I think it was, yeah.
Yeah,
And what year was that?
it was
before
like
COVID.
3-4 years ago.
Yeah.
But, also the new system that they approved in Portland eliminated having to have police officers review each ticket. It could be
Gotcha.
done by a civil servant.
Yeah, you have.
So there's a lot of barriers that could be eliminated. I'm just thinking, one more time, we need to get the tool in our toolbox. Whether we use it or not, that's another issue. Let's get it in our toolbox so that it's available for us to pull if the system gets really bad.
You have to go, sorry.
All right.
We will stop talking so the notes.
Well, it's being recorded, so.
Oh, yeah.
The only thing we didn't talk about was Barbara Carmel's problem, but I think it should
Probably
be,
better to talk about that next.
yeah, we'll put it on the agenda for next month, okay? Once again, thank you, Don, thank you, Jerry, thank you, Spencer, thank you, Jennifer, thank you, everybody. Have a great week, and please be safe out there. Next meeting will be July 13th at 8:30. Appreciate all your participation. Thank
Thank
you.
you all.
Thanks, everybody. Take care.